Hello, and welcome to a data science developer journey where we'll be showing you how to analyze StarCraft II replay files using Jupyter notebooks. This journey is available on GitHub. If you go to github.com/IBM/StarCraft II Replay Analysis. If you follow along, the README describes the journey and how to set it up and run it. The code is available in the repository, including an example replay file if you don't have your own to try out in the notebook. What we'll be walking through today is showing you how to create a Jupyter notebook in Data Science Experience, how to load a replay file into object storage so that we can access it in the cloud environment. We'll be reading the file in using Python code and a module called SC2Reader, and then using some of our own code provided in the notebook, we'll analyze and parse the replay, and then we'll use Bokeh for graphics to show you how to chart some interesting statistics and analyze what happened during the game. In the end, we'll store the replay, the parsed replay, as a JSON document in the Cloudant database. This is done so that you can save your replays and analyze them later using some code of your own. I'll walk through the README to show you some of the setup needed to run the demo. First, you'll need a Data Science Experience login and a Bluemix account. You can use trial accounts to run this journey. Once you're set up, you'll need to have a Cloudant NoSQL database. You can do this either by clicking the Deploy to Bluemix button, which will clone the repo and create it as an app in the Bluemix environment. It will also create the Cloudant service for you. Or you can simply click on the Cloudant NoSQL database link to go into Bluemix and create your own. I'll follow that link now. By clicking on the link, you'll see it gave me a service name with the -8R on there. That part's random, so I could fill in my own name, or I could use the random name that was generated. If you use the Bluemix button, the name would be SC2-Cloudant NoSQLDB. To create your service, simply follow this link and click Create. And again, this is the part that you would not have to do if you use the Deploy to Bluemix button. But in either case, once you've created your service, you do need to go in and create a database in Cloudant. So I created the service, and if you want to get back to it, you can use the Bluemix dashboard and find services. Then you'll go into your Cloudant service and click on Launch. In a brand new Cloudant service, it will look like this. You can click on the database icon, and there are no databases. Now, to follow this developer journey, we need a database. It doesn't matter what it is, but I'm just going to create a seed database. So there's an empty database in there, and that is so that this Cloudant service shows up as a possible data source to use in the notebook. The actual databases that we're going to use are created in the notebook, so it doesn't matter what you call this one. Now that our Cloudant database is set up, I've returned to the README. I'll show you how to log into Data Science Experience, create the notebook, set it up, and run it. Data Science Experience, well, I have a link right here. And you can see you go to datascience.ibm.com. There's a free trial sign up. In my case, I already have a trial, so I will sign in. And from here, I like to use projects and go into my default project. To create a notebook, you can click on Add Notebooks. And you see you can create a blank one, create one from a file, for example, if you cloned the Git repo, or you can create one from a URL. In our case, we'll create it from the URL. Let me go back to the README you can copy the link right here. So we're taking the notebook straight out of GitHub. I can give it a name and a description, and the default Spark service is fine. So create a notebook. And you'll see, if you're new to Jupyter Notebooks, you can have cells with Markdown code, Markdown text, Python code, and it also will show you the output. So for example, this is Markdown text. We'll add some code, and I'll show you in a minute what the output looks like. Before we can run this, we'll need to add credentials. We'll need to add a replay file, add a method to pull that in, and also add credentials to our database. I'm going to jump over to a notebook that I created earlier so I can show you some of this without showing you too much of the credentials, which you should try to keep private. Now, to add the credentials, what I do is I'll create an empty cell. So I've already done it here, but basically what I did is I'll use the plus to create a cell, make sure that's highlighted. I'll create a couple of them. Now, to add the file, select your cell. You'll click on this icon for Find and Add Data, and that brings up this sidebar. Click on Files, and you can use Browse to find your file. So here's where my files are located. Let me pick another one. And open it. So this is adding the replay file to my object storage in DSX. The example that you'll see online used this first one. Once the file is in DSX, I need to be able to read it into my notebook. So this is where, again, make sure you have your cell highlighted because it's going to inject code into your notebook. So an empty cell, and then you use the pull down to insert code, and we'll use insert string IO object. And I will show you an example that I did earlier for that, which is right here. This is the generated code except for a few changes. First of all, I changed this from, and you'll see in the README, it was from IO, import string IO. I changed this to use string IO so that I can read the input in bytes instead of as a Unicode stream. So I changed this to string IO, and also in the response, I changed it from text to content. So the replay file now is going to be read into a stream of bytes. The other thing to notice is this method was created, but also a variable is created and the method was called to pull that byte stream into the variable. You'll see the file name right here that was used. I changed the GUID here and above, and I deleted some of the details from the method, so yours will look a little bit different. But the thing to note is you insert the code, and then you look at data 1. If I was to insert another file, it would continue to generate blocks like the one you see below, but the second file would probably have a name like data 2. So you can continue to add additional replays into empty cells. You won't always get a new method, but you'll get a new variable. The thing to notice here is that the rest of the notebook is assuming data 1, so you just make sure that you have data 1 set appropriately. You can read that replay stream in and then run the code. The next thing we need to do for setup, though, is we need credentials for our Cloudant database. And again, that has a variable name called credentials1. And the way I do that is I need to add the Cloudant database to my project, and then I will use the connections to insert into an empty cell. So if I go back to my projects listing, from projects, and I'm in my default project, I can click on Find and Add Data again to get the sidebar. This time it's the Connections tab. And if I create a connection, and the trick here is, remember, you're doing this at the project level, give it a name. It's a data service. And in the list, you should see the Cloudant database that you created earlier. It needs to have a database so that you can select it, and that you can click create. So if I click create, now I'll have a demo connection in my project. If I go back to my notebook and I go to find and add data, I click on connections. Now I have two different connections I can choose from. So what I would do is, again, always make sure you have an empty cell, otherwise the injected code will clobber whatever you've highlighted. And I would click on the new connection and say insert to code. And what it will insert will look like this, but I've X'd out all the username, password, and specifics of my credentials. So we follow that, make sure it's set to credentials 1, and then the rest of the notebook is set up to use it. Now I already had my credentials and I ran the notebook, but what you would want to do is you just either press play to walk through the cells one at a time, or go to the cell menu and say run all, and it'll run it from top down. I'm just going to scroll through these. So there's a pip install to make sure that some of the Python requirements are there. Loading the replay uses SC2 reader, and again, this is where it was using data 1, so again, check the code, and I try to catch errors. If you make a mistake there, hopefully it will complain. The first thing we do is, once it's loaded, we print some basic information. So if you're just playing with the replay, you can see that once we've pulled it in, you can just print out the replay date, name, and players. And this example and some other attributes that you can find will show you what you get with SC2 Reader. And it also helps you keep track of which replay we're processing right now. And then there's quite a bit of code where we analyze the replay. So we've created categories for units and groups. We've created handlers to process the different events. And there is this replay data class that's defined, a Python class where we will load in the replay, process the events, and it has a method to spit that out as a Python dictionary, which we'll use in our code. So once we've done that, we can try to hopefully do more than try. We can visualize the game and show you what happened with some statistical analysis. So here's some Python imports that we need. We've added additional code for using some Nelson rules to detect bias and trends and standard deviations. And again, more processing. Now this is the cell. When we run this spits out the charts. Now Bokeh Graphics is interactive, so after you run it, you'll get these charts, and you can hover and look at some of the data points, for example. Basically what we're spitting out here is two types of charts. First, there's this chart that shows you the trend over time for each metric, and the players are side by side. So here the winning player, Neeb, we'll show you how he collected minerals, what his rate was, and next to that the losing player, Showtime. And if you look at the scale, you'll notice Neeb's scale goes a little bit higher, and we're showing you the bursts where he showed some continuous improvement. He had a burst here and another burst here. Showtime started with an early burst and followed up a little bit later with another burst. So Neeb clearly had an advantage here, and if you look at these trends, you'll get some insight into who is has a faster economy, and you also can look for a strategy as far as where the ups and the downs are, whether someone's emphasizing their economy first or maybe going on attack. Next, there's a box plot, and the box plot shows you the second and third quadrants or quartiles to show you sort of the deviation and a statistical analysis of a summary of the game. So again, here Neeb had better numbers, a higher box, and the whiskers here on the box plot shows you the range. We have, as we look at some of the other metrics, where we did similar graphics, this one shows you, in addition to the box and the whiskers, you'll see an indicator for the outliers. So there's quite a bit of statistics going into the box plot and also the Nelson chart with our arrow annotations. The other annotations show you the upper and lower control limits, first and second standard deviations with the dotted lines. And the green and red shows you where they are statistically above or below the X bar, and I mentioned earlier the arrows for strong bias. So we have a variety of charts. Well, we have several metrics we do the same charts for, and that's basically how we've decided to analyze and demonstrate the game. And once we're done, we already parsed the replay file, so we thought we'd store it in our Cloudant database. Here, by the way, if you want to see what the dictionary looks like, you can uncomment this print. It's commented out because it's fairly large, but if you're poking around, you can uncomment it. You can just run this one cell, take a look at the results, and then comment it again. Now, the add to Cloudant, we're using those credentials I mentioned earlier, credentials 1. It doesn't take much code to add to Cloudant. We just need the credentials. So with the credentials we mentioned, I'm creating two databases, one called SC2 Replays, the other called SC2 Recents. I'm not using that seed database. I'm just saying if it doesn't exist, create it. And then we're taking that Python dictionary with replay object as dict, creating a document, and there it goes into our Cloudant database. So now it's a JSON document in the database, easy to use later. And by the way, SC2 Recents, we're deleting the old ones and just saving the latest, while SC2 Replays will save all of them. So you have your collection, but you'll also have the latest one, so you can add code to compare the latest one with your collection if you start to aggregate the data. But that's all I have for now. I hope you enjoyed going on this developer journey. Please fork the repository, try the code, and let us know how it goes.